welcome parents, teachers to our webinar evening. And tonight we will be talking about facts and myths in baby brain stimulation. And so we are also supported by our team of panelists. And so Shirley is on the panel and some of our other colleagues. So if you want to know about them, they are on this website link, so you can find out a bit more about them. As Shirley has mentioned, we are doing a Thai translation tonight. So do go to the Thai channel if you would need that language support. A quick introduction of BrainFit before I dive into the topic. So my name is Cheryl. I'm the founder of BrainFit. I'm trained as a physical therapist. And I've been working with the brain for a very long time, since I graduated from Australia. I'm also a mother, and I've also written a book, and greatly enjoy brain discussions and, and educating about, what's this very important organ that controls all of us. So BrainFit was founded in Singapore in 2001. We offer brain training programs in learning centers and partner schools in Asia and Europe. And you can see some of our centers here. So we do offer enrichment centers, programs through our enrichment centers, as well as preschool programs. Yeah. So these are some of our partnerships, some of the awards we have won in the 20 years that we have been around. So that's my quick introduction. If you are new to BrainFit, again, welcome. And for parents who are returning to our webinar, welcome back. So tonight we are talking about a really important phase in a human's life, right? The first few years, people often talk about that as a time when lots of things are happening, in the brain. So we want to discuss, facts and myths. So just to understand a little bit of what the latest science is talking about the baby's brain. So that would be my intention. And I have a poll to get us going. So this is, before I launch it, I'll just read my question. So just to get to know the audience a little bit, brain training my baby is, so I would like you to choose one of the answers. So number one, not necessary, right? So brain training my baby is not necessary. Babies should be left alone to develop at their own pace, right? If you think that, then please choose that. So brain training my baby is about activating the right brain using special techniques to develop skills like photographic memory, etc. Or brain training is about nurturing a baby's natural potential to the maximum. All right, let me launch my poll, and we'll probably take a half a minute or so. So if I could get some participation from the audience, that would be great. And no right and wrong, so don't worry. And it's anonymous, so so it's not a test. Just to get to know, a sense of what the audience is feeling, and so that we can, so that I can kind of pitch it a little bit, more appropriately for you. So thank you for your participation. And so we have about 70% of participation now. Thank you very much. And we will just wait another 5 counts. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. We've got about close to 80% of participation now. Yeah, I'll just end the poll and share the results. Okay, so we're seeing that about 6% of our audience think that brain training is probably not necessary. Babies should be left alone. So about 20% of the audience think that it should be using some special techniques or methodologies to develop, maybe exceptional skills in this very unique age group. And then the majority, obviously, 74% believes that it's actually about nurturing baby's natural potential to the maximum. So thank you. And this will really be our agenda, for this evening. So we'll explore what the science is saying for each of these points. So let's talk about the first point, So we have some people in the audience think that perhaps it's a little bit exaggerated, look, nobody in this audience, I'm 100% sure, would have grown up with any sort of brain training, right? So, and we are fine. We're probably, most of us are probably successful, and we are fine, right? So it could be something that's created. So I just want to share a little video, right? And this is from the Harvard of the Center of the Developing Child. Excuse my little, link there, right? And I just play a short video, just to see what the scientists say on this very important topic. And this is from Harvard, so it's a legitimate institution, certainly. Yeah.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Yeah, so I thought that's a really nice video showing us what, how the brain looks like inside with some of the neurons firing. So what are some of the key learning points, certainly, just within the video? Genes provide a blueprint, right? So we now know that babies are born with certain traits already, certain skills. They already have strengths, advantages, they may already be having a stronger math brain, for example, or abilities to learn language versus other babies. And some other babies may not have that. But that is the initial blueprint. So that's from the DNA, right? The genes that's passed down to baby from mom and dad and possibly from grandparents as well, because genes can even skip a generation, yeah? But that's only one part of the story. Early experiences then will shape this brain with lasting effects. I often talk about the brain pathways, the connections that are laid down in the early years. They tend to be quite robust because the early years, and I'm talking about 0 to 5 or 6, right, is when a lot of development is very naturally happening. Yeah. And so once they are laid down, beyond 6, we kind of talk about rewiring the brain, right? We're changing some of these original networks, right? Because whatever that's laid down in the early years could last. And therefore, if you build, and lay down healthy, strong, positive pathways, that could be a great learning advantage for a long period after, this early childhood phase. And of course, if you don't have as healthy pathways, and then it could create issues. Now, the next learning point, experiences. Now, because the brain is an organ of use, right? So you saw, the kind of impulses just now on the video, right? Like once the electrical signals connecting up the brain cells, right? So if you use or participate in certain activities more, right, that cluster of cells, brain cells that are involved will wire up, and then you are building pathways in the brain. Now, if you do not have certain experiences, and they mention, even some of the nerve connections start to prune away, that means they die away, yeah? So experiences, therefore, it has got a huge impact, and they determine whether the child will have a strong or weak brain foundation, right? And because these early pathways, as I've mentioned, tend to be lasting, right? And then experiences kind of are forming these pathways, right? Of course, there's a natural development that's going on. There's kind of like triggering your visual development, your auditory development. But you need sounds, you need language in the environment to kind of like have these laid down for all the languages that you want to master, etc. So brains are built through repeated use. Yeah. So we think about it as a practice effect. So very much like the heart, where you exercise regularly, it gets stronger. The brain, if you use those pathways regularly and frequently, then those pathways become really strong, right? And well-used circuits become fast and efficient. This morning, I was just spending some time with quite a well-known neuroscientist on Zoom, and again, we were talking about how important processing speed is in the brain, right? So at the end of the day, we're really talking about rapid connections among the brain cells that gives us intelligence and all these wonderful critical thinking, learning abilities, etc. Yeah. All right. Now, so I think I'm just going to move on from the first point, right? So I think I won't say that it's necessary. I just think that we all should know what the science is informing us. The science is informing us that early experiences matter. I think this is something that everybody needs to know, and they matter because they affect the future, and they matter because we want to lay down the right kind of pathways to serve us well in the future. We want to stay away from unhealthy pathways that could hinder us. Yeah. All right. So that would be for that first point. Now, the second point, right, is about using special techniques. And I talk about right brain because often, people think about brain training as right brain training. And just a little bit of history, right brain training is actually quite the idea that we need to train in particular the right side. It's quite 1980s, it's kind of quite old, right? Because before in the 1980s, I mean, we can't really look into a live brain. We don't have fancy technology. So we were making some guesses, right? So at that time, we guessed that we know that the brain has the left and the right side. And we guessed that language, the slow, logical, not language, slow, methodical processing, sequential processing was on the left. Whereas the right is the fast brain, the creative brain, that senses very quickly where your gut feel is seated. That's where speed is seated, right? So that's the old thinking, right? So now we know we have two sides, right? But really no task only use one side of the brain. And speed is everywhere, for example, all right? And both sides of the brain are used for most tasks, yeah? So, but just to understand where that came from and why people are talking about stimulating that fast brain, because they were saying that we were overemphasizing on school, which is very sequential teaching, if you're looking at reading or math or numbers, right? Very logical. So let's kind of boost the creative part. So hence all the talk about right brain training, yeah? So I just want to talk about certain special skills though, and I get asked this a lot. I know it's a smaller size in the audience that feel that this is really what we are, brain training is about, but still I think it's important because there's just a lot of information out there also on the internet, and we get so many questions. So I think it is worthwhile to have a discussion, yeah, on some of these skills that sounds really excellent. I'm sure if you ask any parent, do you not want to give your child photographic memory? Nobody would say no, right? I'm a parent. I have two girls. I'll say sure, right? Why not? So photographic memory, speed reading is another area that I get asked a lot on that as a technique, right? Whether it's appropriate, do you even do it? And of course, ESP. ESP is quite peculiar. It's quite particular, not peculiar would not be the right word, but it is quite unique to the right brain because they believe in fast processing. So it's kind of like your instinct, right? So we want to talk a little bit just to cover that very quickly. Now, quick definition for photographic memory. So it is the ability to recall an image, a visual, from memory with high precision without using a memory technique. So this, the famous story, all right, is of this individual. He's from the US. He's an artist. He took a helicopter flight over New York, right? And then he could draw from memory, and look at this, what he saw. right? And he has autism as well, right? But he is gifted, tremendously. I'm sure. I mean, nobody, I can't do this, right? I can't even do any of this. But very accurately drawn out after a flight on a helicopter. So we're talking about really special skills like that. Incredible, yeah. But again, you're talking about a brain that is quite atypical because he suffers from severe communication and language um, issues as well. Now, what do we know from the science? Photographic memory naturally occurs in 2 to 10% of children, at least from whatever kind of older research. This is quite old now. Scientists are not looking at photographic memory necessarily a lot nowadays, right? I think there's a lot more understanding of other more important systems like working memory, which is your intelligence memory, yeah? So very rare in adults. So then they look at memory champions, who are able to remember like 50 decks of cards, right? So that's crazy. But we all know that they do that through really studying and practicing memory techniques. All right. So it's really techniques like the memory palace, so they are actual skills. And if you join our executive, our adult training program, we will teach you some of these techniques, right? And so are they good, right? Now, memory techniques and strategies can be very useful for children, right? It's like if you want to remember a spelling word, and my daughter will come up to me and say, "Mommy, do you give me a strategy, right, to remember favorite?" I mean, she struggles with that. So she can remember favor, and then she can't remember the end. So then it's a strategy. Okay, then we have ITE, and we came up with ice cream topping and an egg on top, right? Something funny. Now that's a technique. That's a strategy. And to this day, she will always be able to recall and spell a favorite, right? Because there is you can rely. I mean, you have created a visual and hook it to a word. And once that visual is recalled, you can remember that easily, right? So techniques are useful, but more importantly is to have the kids create their own strategies, yeah? But certainly not something we will discuss or, necessarily emphasize on, I think, in the first 5 years or 6 years, because there are a lot more important foundations to build. So technique strategy, certainly very useful for learning, but more kind of like, when you start formal schooling. Now, very importantly, memory is not intelligence, right? So I mentioned, there's not so much investigation into photographic memory, but a lot more into systems like working memory, because that is more about intelligence, about critical thinking, right? When we talk about photographic memory type of memory, it's really kind of like stick and recall, right? A stick and recall, right? So it's just kind of a stick without really processing. Whereas you want the kind of memory that is stick and think, makes sense, yeah? So if you look at memory, and this is just the chart, the table is the older table, for critical thinking, the different hierarchies and levels. We call this deep thinking, if you go through the different levels. So memory is really at a very superficial level. You need it for thinking, but it is not the end of it all. And I think this is important because young babies can be exceptionally good at memorizing, right? So, and they appear really, really smart, right? And they can, right? Because they know lots of things. But I think, and we just need to know it's good. It means memory is probably intact and healthy. But what we don't want to stop at that though. We want to, the purpose of memory is to serve thinking. So it's not the end, right? So we're not building memory for memory's sake, right? We're building memory to be used. Yeah. So the use part, I think it's an important thing that we have to remember for young children, especially because they can fool us with the exceptional memory, but actually they are not understanding, right? And and then we like the memory, but we don't like the not understanding. So parents got to be mindful, educators got to be mindful. What about memorizing words, right? I often get that. Surely it's okay if they are memorizing words, yeah? Just have to be careful. Overemphasis, right? And we're talking about overly doing it, or if you memorize it overly, you may disrupt a child trying to learn decoding, right? Phonological rules, right? Like blending, because that's more tedious. Sticking is faster and easier, to be honest, which is why babies find, they do that because it's easier, right? In the longer run, phonological rules are much more valuable for building strong reading foundations. Yeah, in fact, if you bring a child to a reading test, right, an older child, we actually have a test that is having you to read out nonsense words. Why? Because we want to see whether you understand the rules. Are you able to use the phonological rules to actually sound out the words? So it's a typical section in a standard reading test. Yeah. So, but I'm not going to talk so much about reading. However, my next webinar will be about facts and myths in early reading development. I think reading needs to be discussed. It is a tremendously important skill, affects school a lot. Children who read well have a huge school advantage, and foundations are built in the early years. And so join us in the next webinar, and it will be all about reading, yeah, and clarifying again some of the concepts there, and yeah. So we'll have that discussion there. Now, so moving on, let's talk about speed reading, right? Speed reading is really an adult strategy. For us, for busy CEOs especially, to gather a gist of information very quickly. So you read about the CEO who's reading 10 books a week, right? And he has great speed reading skills because he's so busy, right? But he wants to know what's out there. So speed reading is a great technique, right? But the invention of it is really to help us to gather information quickly, right? Now, at the processing level, we know that visual processing is a fast system, but linguistic comprehension, understanding is often slower and more effortful. Yeah. So what happens is that you now have a balance, right, between speed and comprehension. And it is often in the inverse kind of relationship, right, where if you have if you have speed or comprehension, like one side, if speed goes up, let's say, right, let's say up is high, okay, so you're fast, comprehension then tends to go down, right, because you are trading off, right, so you're going quickly, therefore it's hard to then have the time to have deep understanding and deep thinking, right? School, unfortunately, is mostly about deep thinking because you are creating knowledge, content connections, you are teaching them brand new ways of doing things. Whereas as an adult strategy, you already have all your foundations, right? So you can just build on top of that a technique, right? Whereas for children, in the early years especially, it's all about building foundations, and that takes time, yeah? And especially when we talk about comprehension, it's tiring to the brain, right? It takes effort. So it's a trade-off. Like, you can never get through medical school or law school using speed reading. You just can't because you need deep thinking, and school is often deep. Yeah, but great strategy if you're a busy adult. All right, it really helps you to gather information quickly. But there is a trade-off in terms of the deep understanding, connecting ideas, applying, those kind of concepts, right, in a more sophisticated way, which is what school is all about. Especially in the early years, you are building a lot of basics in problem solving and thinking. Okay, now just very quickly on extrasensory perception, ESP. So that I'm discussing this, in case you're just joining us, because it's kind of the theory of the right brain, where the right brain, the old understanding is that it's fast, and therefore where do we get our gut reactions? It's kind of in the right side. So it's not really, all right. I think at this point, look, I haven't spent a lot of time studying. Why? Because there's no evidence of anyone graduating or passing an exam using ESP alone. So I think I might want to, I research on more things that can be applied, and for my children to do well and to learn, be a stronger learner. But, right, from the little that I have read, right, it is true that some people have a stronger gut sense, right? I will share with you, this particular paper I read about nurses in the ICU. So they had nurses who were working in the ICU predict which patients, like on which bed, is going to get an infection in the next 2 weeks, right? And
this was before anyone had any infection. Nobody's ill. I mean, they are, of course, unwell in the ICU. Nobody's having an acute infection. So they asked the nurses just to rate, who do they think? It's prediction, right? Who would be the highest chance of getting an infection? So the nurse rated, and you know what they found? The most accurate nurses tend to be the most experienced and really good nurses, right? So, I mean, the summary of what I was reading, and they look at people who could predict the stock market, right? They took look at why people who sold all the stocks before a big crash. I mean, there's a huge advantage if there is indeed such a skill. Yeah, but most of the research that I have come across, yeah, and it isn't a lot, I must confess, I haven't gone into this very deeply. It's because it is that the people who could predict were often spending hours and hours in their field. So the people who could predict the stock market spend hours looking through financials of company, doing all the dry, boring stuff, but they are good at what they do. So not so much of, like an extra skill, but they were just people who were very skilled in what they do. So to me, look, the more you build fluency, the faster your circuits go in your brain, the more you're going to see patterns that people can't, right? And therefore, I want to concentrate on building those networks and building the core, because once you have that and you specialize into an area, and then, yeah, you can see patterns and you could be exceptional in that field. All right, so that's on ESP. Now, of course, we need to talk about some other, right brain kind of strategies. And I actually had an inquiry came in, with part of our registration for the webinar. There's a question component. Somebody did have a question on flashcards, right? The question specifically was, does flashcards support deep thinking? Great question, I thought. Right, now flashcards, if you trace to the history, it's really an adult recall strategy. It's not a learning strategy. Now, learning and recall is very different. Recall means you already learn, right? It's simply a technique to retrieve information that's already stored, right? It's not in the process of storage. That is learning. So flashcards is never used, I mean, in the long history, in the past, for teaching, yeah? But it's a recall strategy. I used that when I was in medical school doing physical therapy. I mean, exactly for this, right? For your anatomy, for your nerves, right? It's so complex. So you do cards, and then you use that to recall, right? Check yourself, yeah? So that is the history. And of course, it's been brought to cards, that's now teaching kids different things, yeah, numbers, reading, words, vocabulary, any kind of flashcards, you have it out there on Amazon to be purchased, right? Now, if you are thinking about teaching, and of course you are talking about content, and I'm just going to use a reading, alphabets. If you are trying to get the kids to know vocabulary, for example, B, B is a bumblebee, is the letter B, B, right? A book is a much better tool in teaching, to be honest. Why? Because you are creating, vocabulary does not exist in a vacuum. A bee exists within a context, right? Such as this. Every morning, the little bee flew from flower to flower. Bees exist with flowers. Yeah, so it's a family. So you are talking about enriching the vocabulary, not just kind of like insight, okay, it flies, okay, alone, right? Or how it sounds or how it is spelt. But now you are building content, and that's learning, right? Because we're talking about young infants. They don't have the language foundations yet, right? In these early years, especially, it is being built. So we need the connections. We need to give context and meaning. And of course, there's great grammar patterns. Flew from, right? Flew to. So you start to hear all these glue words, we call words that are really important. We don't necessarily teach them. To, from, is, are, kind of your grammatical structures, but they are the glue words. They glue everything together to give you meaning, and they're really important, right? And so in terms of the teaching experience, right, certainly I would say if you're looking at really building vocabulary, right, read a book every day, right? That is a much richer source. And certainly if you're thinking about a vocabulary, flashcards for vocabulary. Yeah, at this point, I just want to invite, if you have questions, we do have the Q&A working, and our panelists are here to support me if you have questions. Yeah, so feel free at any point to put them down, and we will get to them as much as we can. No questions, that's fine. We will just keep going, right? But if you want to use flashcards, is that okay? Yes, we use BrainFit uses cards, all right, word cards, right? I don't like the word flash because it feels like you're flashing, you're going quickly, like a recall strategy. Because when we use it for recall, we flash it. Like, can you remember this? Okay, this is the clavicle, collarbone. Oh, this is the patella, the kneecap, right? And you're fast, right? Because you're testing your recall. So we use word cards, right? For example, like this. So if you are using cards, right? Yes, it's fine, but I would encourage again, don't stop at the one word, enrich it. So the ball, look at this. And of course, you can also use it to look at acoustic patterns, for example. This is what we do at BrainFit. We use it to give the understanding of a vocabulary theme, a family of objects that are all found in the bedroom, for example, all right, or clothing, right? So it's either a theme or acoustic patterns. In this case, we are talking about words beginning with the sound b, right? So then you talk about ball, a bus, a baby, a box, and you don't stop at there. Look at the ball. Can you all kick a ball? Come on, show me how you would kick a ball. Look at the ball. It's now rolling. Yes, it's a ball, and it's round, and you can kick it. It's fun, right? So you're talking around it. It's kind of like being the book, right? You're creating your context, yeah. And children need context because they are building connections. Remember, things are connecting. The bees connecting with the flowers, connecting with the garden. Oh, I get it, right? They're together. Now I've got kicking, I've got the ball, I've got round. Oh, wow, I connect again, right? So that's how you, I think, to use cards maximally. I mean, that's certainly how I would recommend that we use it. Now, how about rapid flashing, right? So, I mean, as a technique, right, I'm just going to show this, and this is something I took from the internet as well, right? Talking about right brain technique. It's in Japanese, but I think we can all... 豚、ライオン、リス、カバ、カンガルー。豚、ライオン、リス、カバ、カンガルー。豚、ライオン、リス、カバ、カンガルー。All right. So the idea of right brain is that you should go as fast as you can, right? Because the right brain is a fast brain. So if you're too slow, you're kind of engaging the left brain, but you go really, really fast, and then your right brain kinds of kick in, and that's what you want to stimulate. So that was the whole idea behind rapidly flashing, right? So then what's the evidence? Do we rapidly flash the cards, right? Now, I do not like speed, fast moving images for a young baby. I draw that evidence from research looking at kids interacting with devices, right? Because if anything moves fast, it is screen images. And we know that scientists recommend that you stay away from gadgets, at least for the first 18 months, for example. Why? One of the concerns is that the images are too fast moving. For the visual system, it can be potentially disorganizing to the focus system, right? So just on the first point. But if we are using, quick kind of flashing to quickly absorb information, such as vocabulary, in this case, I think we all knew that they were teaching us, Japanese words, right? Vocabulary. How would we respond? Now, I just want to talk, and this is a very recent study, and I'm just kind of pulling out the headline. I just did it this morning, right? Parentees. Now, this is University of Washington publishing a paper in 2020, so just last year, right? Parentees helps parents and babies, right, make conversations and boost language development. So what they saw was that they had families who spoke to babies using this language called parentees, right? And then this group of families whose parents were not taught to use parentees, and they had cameras in the houses, so they could literally see what kind of language was being used. And they found that in families who had used parentees, by 18 months when the babies were measured, they had an average of 100 words vocabulary. In families whose babies were not exposed to parentees, it was average 60 words. So now you have clear scientific evidence if you are talking about language vocabulary acquisition, which is important. Yeah, we all want that. But what do we do to get that? Parentees, apparently. And I can tell you that this is one of many research papers that have come out on parentees, right? But this is just the latest 2020 paper from University of Washington. What is parentees? Parentees is what we do very naturally, is that, oh, this is a ball. We can kick a ball. I'm going up and down like singing a song. I do that quite naturally, right? It's just a maternal thing. And of course, some fathers do that too. So what is the characteristic of parentees? High-pitched sounds, elongated vowels. Vowels are often exaggerated. The ball, the I stretch that. Facial expressions, short and slow, right? Slow tempo. Simple, sing-song voice, repetition. So I draw my research from this. I think there is really very robust research to show that what really engages babies' brain for language processing and help them develop those pathways are if you speak slow, you exaggerate, and you go up and down in your pitch, and you're animated and you're happy. That attracts babies' brains, right? For some reasons, and it helps then consolidate the pathways for vocabulary, as has been shown in research after research, country after country, not just English, Spanish-speaking families. If you use parentees, Spanish vocabulary goes up, right? So it's not exclusive even to the language. It is just our brain has been wired to respond to the tone, right? And and that's what we know. So my advice, if we want super vocabulary, go slow, right? So no, flashcards is not something that, flashing the rapid speed is not something that I ever did with my children, right? Or something that, I would necessarily encourage because of what the evidence seems to be showing. All right, and now just a couple more, right? Because we still got the third point, yeah. Now, this is about the idea that, listening to Mozart music is going to make a baby smarter is one of one of the most persistent parenting myths. This is in an article, this is quite recent, I think 2016 or 18, right? So people thinking that, there's a Mozart effect. And of course, all these baby Einstein, special videos that have been made for babies, right? So here you can see a headline. Disney offers millions of parents baby Einstein refunds. Why? Because the research showed that it did not make the baby smarter. In fact, in one of the groups who were watching these videos, the baby's abilities went down compared to the group who did not even do anything. Right. So yes, there are some myths out there. I can tell you some of these videos, information is still perpetuated. The Mozart effect came from a particular study that was done on college students, right? So they listened to Mozart music, then they did a test, and they all did better after they listened to Mozart music. College students. So what they do now know is that certain music, not necessarily classical, but yes, classical music has some benefits in certain situations. But certain music, right, has the ability to have a short-term activation of your brain. And so you can have a temporary elevation of scores. So it was just simply because of that one study on college students. Then people just extrapolated to the babies. No research was ever done at that point, but people started, a book was written, CDs were sold, millions of CDs, right? And the whole theory was evolved. But then scientists subsequently did research and now the kind of Mozart effect it's kind of debunked, but it's not. It's just that we know that there seems to be a temporary arousing effect so that you do perform a little bit better afterwards, short term. Right? So these are some of what we know about special techniques, right? I hope that's all the time I have to cover, some of these common questions that we get. I do want to talk about the best ways to nurture a baby's natural potential, right? and that is what I personally believe brain training is about as well. So remember our very first video from Harvard, right? It talked about daily experiences, so whatever that baby is doing is building those connections. So I want to talk about then what do we do on a daily basis? What connections do we build? If it's not photographic memory, I talked about working memory, like then what do we do? What are those skills? And I think that's important to have a discussion about. So now, very quickly, so here on the blue ring, I can tell you that all of us in this room universally wants our children or our students, if you're a teacher, to do well in. We have a common goal, and that's why you are here this evening. We want all the school subjects, literacy, numeracy, do sports well, STEM, math, science, arts, regulate your own emotions. Not just that now, we want the 21st century skills in your outer red ring. We want the 5 C's, creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, complex problem solving to be able to handle things in the future world. So the old understanding was that these are all our ambitions. And then our genes determine a lot of those, and of course school, right? And then you would build, kids who did math well, they're great. And there were kids who just are not the math people. So then we understood over time that yes, there's a genetic component, but the genetic was giving us the brain, the genes, right, expressed into the brains. Now, it's the brain that's really helping us navigate the blue and the red. It's the brain that's helping us to learn how to read and how to count, etc., right? So now the new thinking is that, okay, the DNA affects the brain, but let's study the brain because we can't change DNA. But then now we realize, hey, we can shape the brain. Right? So therefore, can we change behavior, outcome, learning? Yes, yes, and yes, right? Just like what Harvard said, you can lay down foundations that can have lasting impact positively down the road. So what do we know about the brain? Broadly, we know that there are different areas. You saw that in the video a little bit as well. Visuals kind of at the back. You have your movement area. You have your language areas at the side, right? Impulse control, etc. But 5 core areas: movement, visual, auditory, emotions, focus. Everything goes back to each of them and also the interconnection among them. They don't work in isolation, right? In fact, it is highly complex, right? This is really where BrainFit has been working for the last 20 years. We like this part, right? But you can't see it. It's kind of like a black box, but there are layers and layers and layers of skills. And I'm not even doing justice summarizing this. We use this for our internal teacher training, actually. But this is how we try and summarize, cluster it into sub areas, but it is a complex systems. And we know that certain skills, right, are pre-academic skills, we call them, where they really support academic learning, right? So the early skills, otherwise you can call that. And then there are the executive skills. So these ones develop later, right? As you are going through primary school, late secondary school, you're really forming your own mind, self-management. So you have your executive skills as well. But they all contribute to you doing well in anything. For example, right? You want somebody to read. Let's just look at the green zone, right? You need to first process sounds. The baby needs to hear the sounds like b, ball. We talk about that. That's pre-academic. That's really happening in the early years. You need the brain to stick that sound, right? To not just to process and then to stick it. And then you need the child to put together to use it, right? By 2 years, they're supposed to be expressing themselves, to have speech. And later on, then we are looking at really great fluency and verbal intelligence and then supporting reading as they go to school, etc. It is one foundation block affecting the other. The Harvard video again showed like it's like building the house. One foundation influences the other. This is what they mean. If you don't have a sharp auditory processing, yes, reading could be very difficult later on, right? If the sounds are not sticky, yes, language could be difficult later on, or reading, etc. All right, so what are some of these pre-academic skills, right, that are happening? I think they warrant a discussion because these are kind of like your early skills that support learning. So, and you can see the great importance, okay? So if you look at the visual processing, and these are all research-based, babies who have stronger visual processing predicted stronger math results later on. these are baby research, who are able to process sounds faster. Later on, by P2, P3, secondary, their English scores are higher, right? We know that working memory is correlated to critical thinking. We know that cognitive flexibility is correlated to creative thinking. You need to be flexible to think out of the box, right? We know that a growth mindset, and this we have been talking quite a lot of, affects resilience. We know that emotional regulation, whether you can control your emotions, right, will determine how successful you are socially in life. So some of these skills are very deep, not really discussed, but having huge future effect. And this is really where I think parents should study, right? This is where certainly we spend a lot of time, because these are real with what the research is showing us, that's really able to influence what's happening in the future. And we can lay down these skills in the most robust way that we possibly can, yeah. So the methodology that we use at BrainFit, highly recommend to all of you, right? We use the SMART play. It's just an acronym. We use S for scaffolding a lot. Scaffolding play, what does it mean? That means you level up and down, right? Observe, learn to observe your baby, right? If the baby can't do it, don't just kind of like, okay, change another toy, right? Learn to, bring it down a little bit. You're stretching the brain, right? Or if it's too easy, then make it a bit harder. So this is what we try to do in our baby class, right? In case we had another question, what does actually BrainFit do in your program? So we do that, right? We get together and we learn how to scaffold play and what are the most useful play. M, multiple types, as you can see in the charts. We are talking about multiple skills affecting multiple areas, and these areas also need to interconnect. A lot of work, actually a lot of skills that we should be developing at these early times, that we have such a good opportunity. Now, we always advocate attentive, stretch the play, build attention. If they're getting bored, keep them on it for a little bit. If they get bored and you switch, that's short attention span, right? Attention means staying on even though you're feeling a bit bored. You stretch your ability, right? Attention span and stamina is not comfortable, right? It's not about, oh, I enjoy it, therefore I'm paying attention. That's not attention stamina. It's staying on task when things are not, like greatly fun, but I can still stay on task. But of course, we try and make it fun and engaging. But it's a style rather than the fast-paced activities, which, generally the right brain, a school of thought tend to advocate. Reshaping the brain using positivity. Your parents' positivity is so valuable. If your genetic blueprint is lacking in certain things, parents, you can use your positivity to reverse it, right? I mean, through scaffolding and positivity. And of course, emphasizing on thinking versus rote memorizing is something. So these are the key essence. I think it's important. I think it's useful, maybe just to be introduced to that. Keep your play wide. Learn to level up and level down. Don't just stop at can you play or not play, like a checklist. Often parents are kind of testing the child, right? But you use it as it's a process, right? Even if you can do it now, you check. Can I stretch them? Can I level up? And that's how you build that more robust connection. Okay, stretch attention, stretch thinking, etc. Right, and just some strategies in each of the areas I thought what I would use. And again, we often come back to these 5 areas. They are important. They are the anchor area for many important tasks, like math. Math is kind of a visual track. Language is kind of the audio track, right? Deep thinking is kind of your focus track. So these clusters are useful to know. I'm just going to give you some ideas, right, or some skills. What are the skills to be more concrete, show you a few videos, yeah. So for example, a movement, yeah. So what do we want to do? Have children, challenge them in different modal planning activities. So here you can see our preschoolers, right? And this is a daily, we have a smart moves kind of almost daily, right? Where we are challenging the thinking in coordinating your body to execute a movement, all right? And so bring them to the playground at the lay level, right? Make sure that they have a huge, strong movement. Those they're challenging, they're climbing, they're swinging, navigating different structures to build the motor system. All right, so that's one important cluster. Then you have the math, visual, also the Chinese cluster, yeah. Chinese as a subject, it's a lot more visual, right, than English is. So now I'm just showing you one particular skill, important for math, right? Not so much for Chinese. So here you have a child, right? 18-month-old, and actually this was her first week at BrainFit, and we managed to shoot this video actually for the mother. And thank you, Mom is here for allowing me to use the video. All right, so here we are teaching her how to estimate, right? Important math foundation.
Can you tell me, is it here or here? Have a look. Where do you put them? Here or here? Yeah. Do you put it here or here? We will put them. Okay, now here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Over here only 1 and 2. So try again. You can put it here or here. Very good. Now next one. Where do you put this? Okay, have a look. Look at the cut of view. Good. Well done. Here or here? Very good.
See, this part's really beautiful. That's when this little girl made a connection in the brain, right? She figured out, because she initially put it on this side and then she put it there. That's the thinking, right? And remember, we are not even teaching counting. We're not talking about teaching her to recite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of people think that that's, what math is about. No, math is about spatial representation, right? Number one, represent a certain number of things in the space, right? So we know from the math brain research that there's a part that support math is your ability to estimate, not count, right? Not a precision thing, but to look at the quantities and kind of know where it fits. So this is a little early exercise that we use to do that, right?
This one? Where do you put this? Very good. Well, is it here or there? Which one? Can you tell me, is it here or here?
Okay.
Have a look.
I think it went back, but you get the idea, right? So that's one of the skills, for example, of the many, right? So I've just kind of chosen one to show you that, there are skills, yeah, that's apart from these unique, special technique skills, but foundational little building blocks that we want to build in. Auditory, very important for language. Very simple activity. This is really just processing language and following. So this is, again, a very young girl in our class, and doing a listening activity, right? So building language processing and memory.
Is beside the tree. What is beside the tree? Who are playing with sand? Where are the mushrooms? Which child is reading a book? There is a boy wearing a star t-shirt. What is he holding? There is a boy wearing a star t-shirt. What is he holding? Bear. Okay, so where do you put? Do you place it on the shirt or on the bear? On the bear. Okay.
Yeah, that's processing, right? There's a boy with a star on his shirt, but they didn't ask for the star. What is he holding? And she said the bear, right? So that's that kind of language. So you see, language doesn't exist in like a bear, a single vocabulary. It exists together with the context of a baby holding a bear, a child holding a bear, right? A toy bear. So that's why, I earlier talked about the importance of giving the context. And here you can see that, yeah? And building sequential thinking, and logical reasoning. I won't play this video, right?
Hello, parents.
Sorry, right? But really, you're talking about patterning. So in this case, right, the video was going to show you how we would do A-B pattern, like you have, the sock and a bear, and then a sock and a bear. I think we do that in the classrooms as well. So seeing whether baby can see the sequence, right? And pattern recognition, looking at sequences, really, really useful and a very important pre-academic skills, right? So the moment they are able to see patterns, then you find that learning becomes fast because they see a certain cluster and then they make connections. So here you can see one of our students and he's gone, really quite ahead where, he's doing kind of A, B, B, A, C pattern, right? Which even I was kind of astounded. Mommy actually sent me this video, because she herself was impressed. And again, thank you if you're here, for allowing us to share, yeah?
Middle, square in the middle, circle in the middle, triangle in the middle, circle on the middle, the square on the middle, square on the middle, circle on the middle, triangle on the middle, the circle on the middle.
I think all of you are probably lost, yeah? You probably can't see the details of the circle and the square. But I actually I slowed the video down and it was an A, B, B, A, C pattern. Really quite impressive, right? So they're learned to looking at patterns and it's, again, a huge school advantage, yeah? Okay, so that's really me coming to the end of the talk. So hopefully, I've discussed kind of like, do we leave them alone? Not really, because it's such a precious opportunity. Do we use special techniques? I mean, some of them are good, like speed reading, but I think in the 0 to 5, my personal take is that there are a lot more important skills that really has research proven, like the pre-academic skills, right, that should be robust, and then giving them a strong foundation for the future. Okay, so hopefully that would, before I take any questions, just quickly. So if you're interested in continuing this discussion, actually every Wednesday, if you have the Clubhouse app, right, join us at 9 to 10 p.m. Singapore time on Clubhouse. Either follow me, Cheryl.chia, or follow the BrainFit Club and join us for a discussion. Like next week, we will continue this discussion in case we run over time with Q&A. Right. And I do, if you need to be invited in, I do have 10 invites to give, right? So if you, drop an email to, or follow me, maybe just follow me on Instagram, right? I'm very new to Instagram, but cherylchia.brainfit. If you send me a direct message, I do have 10 invites I can give away, right? So if you did need an invite, they give some of that to people who, start rooms. And then please give us some feedback, whether this was useful for you. I know one negative feedback that I often get is that you run over time. Surely we're again out of time for Q&A. Right, sorry about that. Maybe just take a couple of questions and do join us on Clubhouse as we continue, the discussions further in case I'm not able to take all your questions. But I really appreciate if you can give us some feedback. If you want more information about our programs, have a consultation, sign up for the program, or also next webinar, I'll be talking about facts and myths in early reading development. So I want to talk about reading as an activity and what are some of the things I think can be done to build some of these robust reading connections that serve us well into the long future. Yeah, so that's in about 2 weeks' time, again on a Thursday at 8:30. So do sign up. Also on our website, you can do that as well. Okay, maybe I'll just stop share. I have 2 minutes. Shirley, do you have any questions at all?
We actually have quite a few questions coming. I'm just going to pick a few, and those that we can't answer, we will, of course, check out the feedback form and get back to you. Yeah. So one of the questions that I would like to ask, because we have gotten these questions before, even via inquiry, via email, is that we have parents who ask whether they want to give the child the best, right? So they wonder, can they do both, right? Can we come to BrainFit and do a holistic brain training? Can we also do the flashing of flashcards? Is it fine to do both?
Yeah, look, I mean, so I think my job really is to present the scientific research, and I am really very open. I think if one day, right, and I will say that if one day, if flashing of cards, if some of these techniques, right, like speed reading, have clear research evidence that really support that, I would be the first one to say I'm wrong. Let's do that, right? I mean, come on, these are our babies' brains, right? So I think I'm just presenting the science, right? I think parents have to make a decision. Of course, we have heard of kids, who have gone through, the right brain training program and have benefited, right? And so the kids are faster. I mean, So what we're seeing is that we see kids who have benefited, but in Brain Fit, because we work with the older kids, we also see kids who have been through the right brain training program, who have great attention difficulties. This is all real, right? So I think I'm not going to discount and say that, look, it's not true if it's help somebody that you know. I think it's great. I'm just happy if the baby is turned out well, right? But I think I just want to present the science. I think parents got to make the decision. I think the brain is a brain of use, right? I think you look at the research. So for me as a parent, I've decided I'm just going to go with the slow speed. I'm going with the parentees. I go with the pre-academic skills that I know have direct correlation to the future, and then we learn how to build that through scaffolding. So yeah, that would be my comment, Shirley. I think it's really, and I think it will be fine, right? Our kids are resilient, and like I said, maybe it's some research that I haven't come across, and I will be, most delighted if anybody can send me across a research paper that, that says that, hey, actually, there is maybe some value in some of these quick movement. I mean, I just can't find it. I think that's what I will say, right?
Right, thanks, Cheryl. I think we also spoke quite a bit about the importance of the teaching literacy and vocabulary in a certain manner. But how about a parent asks, right? If you see numeracy, is it good to do repetition and drilling if you are teaching mathematics?
Yeah, okay. There is a place for drills, right? Definitely. But what are you drilling? I am not for drilling in the first 6 years, because I think it's a time when baby is learning how to acquire knowledge. So it's a time when pattern recognition, cause and effect, baby is trying to make sense of the world. So you are building the engine of learning. Right? Whereas when you are drilling content, you are at the content level already. You're not at the engine level. So I am building the engine to acquire content, right? So in my mind, and the pre-cognitive, pre-academic skills is really about building this engine, right? So that by 7, you enter formal school, and even before that, you are ready for hard work, for solid content. And the Singapore school system is pretty, accelerated from primary 1, right? So I would not necessarily drill, all right, but it depends. We're going to be talking about reading, right? I think there definitely is a place for drilling. There are like if a child can't decode very well, I think for a primary 3 kid, my girl is in primary 3 right now, I'm doing drills. You know what I'm doing drills? She needs to be automatic with her addition and multiplication, right? Because otherwise working memory loading will be very high. Drilling is a content strategy, right? But drilling is not the engine. The engine is where baby is thinking. So you need to facilitate this thinking process. So where you saw the little girl trying to figure out, do I put the card here or there? There's nothing to drill. It's just whether she made that connection and had the understanding. So I think that would be my response. I hope I answered that.
Yeah,
But yes, drilling has a place, yeah.
Has a place for it. Yeah. Maybe we take one more question because this one came in, one of the first few questions that came in. I also don't want us to run too late. So one of the questions is more specific to foreigners, right? So for a toddler who is, coming to a foreign country, speaks a foreign language and can't even read and write, right? So the parent or teacher is asking, do you think it is better to use like the audio and visual method rather than flashcard? And I believe in this instance, the flashcard would be about the flashing because otherwise you could be doing flashcards with any visual method and audio method as well. So for a toddler who speaks a foreign language, would just auditory method and visual method be better than flashing or flashcards for this kind of situation?
Okay, look, if you're a baby, and I assume that most of the audience here, we're talking about 0 to 6 brain, yeah? So we're talking about a very young brain. Now, language, okay, flashcards, okay. If you want to build a second language, so I'm not sure if I'm getting it right, but I hear foreign language. So if you are trying to learn a second language, not your mother tongue, right, which is a great time to do it in the early years, right? Bilingual brain has a huge brain advantage. That's the other thing I did not talk about. But learning a second language before the age of 8 is excellent, a long-term brain advantage. So highly recommended. But if you go into language development, and I will be talking about this in my next webinar, because language and reading is a continuum. They are not two separate things. It's just a continuum, right? But talking, listening is the auditory processing system that is at the end of the day, the crux, right? So the listening to the pitches, how the sounds come together, and then of course what vocabulary they build. So the philosophies are the same, whether it's a second language, you need enriched vocabulary, right? You need contextual, grammatical information is preferred, right? Because the baby is building the understanding, right? Not necessarily learning single words like adults, like our adult learning. I think some of the challenge is that we bring a lot of adult learning style because we understand it. We might learn a foreign language using flashcards, and therefore we bring it down to the child level, right? But the reality is that the child is coming from an empty slate. They have no language. You are forming it. Adult has a language, and then you are building another one. So strategies become a bit different. So in the early years, you are really very foundational and putting in the building blocks, right? Really a pillar. You're going to put in a pillar. Then your comprehension, your vocabulary, your spelling, your decoding can be built up on those pillars. So I'm not sure, if I got it right. I assume that it was about a second language. So I would use a lot of oracy, right? Like I said, I would choose to read a book, right? Listen. You can use flashcards in the way that I had suggested. That I much prefer the enriched language way. A lot of conversational turns. Make sure you use the parentheses, right? Because again, that is not English specific. We've seen it in Spanish families, in different families, in different cultures, all benefiting from parentheses, yeah. Okay. I think we'll probably have to end here. Do join us on Clubhouse, all right? And I do see that, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the Q&A, yeah. So sorry, I'm very sorry if I have offended any people in the Right Brain Training Camp. And certainly this is not, this is really me just wishing to share the science. And if you have any good research, I really appreciate, flick it over. I'll be happy to share it in an update forum, and if we have some of these data. I think that's, so in absence, I just go to, the sources that we can get, the good information from, like Harvard, like Princeton Baby Lab, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so apologies, no harm intended, all right? I think we're just, the intention is really just to talk about, what the science is. And again, parents, children are yours, all right? So read up on your own, The issue with reading though, is that there's a lot of untruths as well. So which is why, we do something like that to kind of bring a little bit things of what's happening in the legitimate kind of like sources. So I think for a layman, it might be a bit hard. But I better stop talking. Back to you, Shirley.
Thank you, Cheryl. And everyone, we have actually come to the end of the webinar for today. We'll be keeping the webinar on for another 1 minute or two so that everyone can access the feedback form. We have gotten the link, we have the QR code there. Please note that you can continue filling up the form even after the webinar has ended. If you have any questions that were unanswered or any comment that were unanswered and you like us to get back to you, fret not, just fill up the feedback form, and our team of the different countries will get back to you accordingly. All right? And of course, join our next webinar.